Hey guys, Zibboyeye or just Zib is fine, and today we turn the page to an infamous sequel. This episode I'm looking at Book of Shadows Blair Witch 2. But before we head into this follow-up flop, let's recap the impact of the first movie. Releasing July 30th, 1999, the Blair Witch Project took that summer by storm. Its $60,000 budget was obliterated by a $140 million box office gross. But one of the film's most notable features was its marketing. The website presented the Blair Witch legend and events of the movie as fact. With the nascent found footage genre, many believed it. This resulted in a mass exodus of wannabe witch hunters to the film's setting, Burkittsville, Maryland. Vandalism and theft was not uncommon of these visitors, and citizens couldn't take a step outside without becoming part of someone's found footage. They wouldn't believe it was fiction, recalled a self-professed town historian. And the worst part is, almost none of the movie was even shot in Burkittsville. It was filmed in a more populous nearby town.
You know, you drove by a huge Safeway 2 miles back.
Oh, that was in Burkittsville. I don't shop in Burkittsville. I don't even piss there.
In spite of all that, the chaos served to prove just how popular and profitable the Blair Witch was. Distributor Artisan was thirsty for more.
They're dying for a sequel! A sequel.
Blair Witch.
In November 1999, Hoxon Films, the crew behind the first movie, reunited over phone. The players? Robin Cowie, the producer of The Blair Witch, Ben Rock, who's behind production design and continuity, and finally writer-directors Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez. There they deliberated over the sequel, which in actuality was a prequel. The Ellie Kedward story would follow the origin of the Blair Witch set in a frigid settlement during colonial America. But putting their offer on the table, Sanchez and Myrick were rejected. The film deemed too expensive and unwanted. Not to mention, development was projected to occupy 2 years, and Artisan wanted to strike while the iron was hot. Thereafter, the studio commissioned 3 different scripts. With that, they shopped for a director. In late November, Joe Berlinger was called to Artisan. Though known as an award-winning documentarian, Berlinger had been trying to break into the narrative scene. This meeting was his chance. He excitedly paced in front of executives pitching his passion project. Until Amir Malin, co-president of Artisan, pulls the brakes. "No, we're not here about that. We're here because we think you'd be the perfect candidate to do Blair Witch 2. A request that confused and disappointed Berlinger because he detested the hype around the Blair Witch. Berlinger, as a documentarian, sees himself as a harbinger of truth. He was disgusted to see the Blair Witch soar on the wings of its deceit. Even so, Berlinger agreed to consider accepting the 3 potential screenplays. All scripts continued the handheld camera perspective. Berlinger hated each of them. Continuing the found footage conceit when the jig is already up just doesn't make sense to me, explained Berlinger. "Well, what would you do?" asked Artisan. "I would make fun of the phenomenon. I would do a sequel about real movie fans going back into the woods and they encounter real-life horror." Artisan loved the idea, but planning to make a killing on Halloween sales, they needed to shoot early in the new year. This gave Berlinger a little over a month to finish his script. Despite his hesitance, Berlinger got the directing gig and more, becoming a writer. Think about that, Artisan had 3 scripts ready and they threw them out just to get this director on board in time for the shoot. It makes me think not many were biting at their offer. Artisan must have been pretty desperate. Though information is scarce, principal photography seems to have began in March 2000. The return to Burkittsville was not easy. The opening scene calls for interviews few inhabitants were willing to provide. Resenting the mob the first film invited, citizens ran production out of town. Other than that, shooting was surprisingly lax. Executives were busy in their offices estimating profits to be gained selling stocks, thus leaving virtually no studio presence at the shoot, a filmmaker's heaven. However, it would soon become a production's hell. It's August 2000, the movie releases October 27th, the film nears the end of post-production, until marketing executive Amaret Jones barges in. She demands more scares, thrills, and gushing guts. I can't overstate my disdain for Artisan here. You okayed Berlinger's idea, you approved his script. You gave him the keys to the car, an unsupervised shoot. But over half a year later, with only 2 months left to finish, now you start ordering changes? Now you pretend to care? You had ample time to request these alterations before. But because you neglected these opportunities until the last minute, your employees had to scramble to finish this project, forced to compensate for your incompetent management. And scramble they did. Reshoots and re-edits occurred post-haste. They were cutting it close, the audio was still being mixed 2 weeks before premiere. Faced with adversity, the movie just managed to premiere October 27, 2000 as intended. However, not everything went according to plan. The film opened at $13 million, $2 million short of its budget. The movie was viciously panned by critics, standing at a 14% on Rotten Tomatoes today. Even Berlinger considers the final product mercilessly marred at the hands of the studio. But it stands before me as just a movie, deserving a fair review as any other. So, let's hear it out and look at Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2. The movie is set amid the Blair Witch phenomenon. A group of adults partakes in the Blair Witch Hunt, a tour hosted by Jeff, a man cashing in on the hype. Joining him are Erica, a Wiccan, Steven and his girlfriend Tristan, co-authors, and Kim, a goth movie fanatic. As strange occurrences surround them, the group must surmount their swelling distrust and find the root of their turmoil. I like the premise. 5 people cooped up in an unfamiliar environment, losing their minds. It's exactly what I want and expect from a Blair Witch movie. Speaking of the Blair Witch movie, that is exactly what unifies the cast. Jeff sees the movie as a means to make some dough. Tristan believes the film's validity while Steven sees it as mere hoax, both collaborating on a book about it. Erica resents the film's portrayal of witches, while Kim just enjoyed watching it.
I thought the movie was cool.
Brought together by their obsession, the characters represent those impacted by the first movie. It's this meta writing I enjoy. Sheriff Craven's acts over the top like he's straight out of some cheesy horror movie.
You have been a pain in this town's ass since you were 10. Last thing you need is to end up back in a loony bin.
Similar to its predecessor, the main characters share their actors' names. The movie blurs the line between fiction and reality. One of my favorite examples of this is the cinematography. The film opens interviewing denizens of Burkittsville, a couple of whom are real people giving real testimonies. However, some are fake. We are introduced to Jeff and Cravens here before seeing them in 35mm. Jeff later says,
"All real, all video. Video never lies, Kim. Film does, though."
But if film lies, how is it congruent to the opening video? The movie toys with the audience's distinction between fact and fiction. Since I mentioned it earlier, I see no better time to address one of the sequel's most contentious aspects, the cinematography. Many fans wanted a continuation of the original's handheld account. It is one of the Blair Witch's most notable qualities after all. To see it replaced by standard camera fare is odd. But I side with Berlinger on this one. For one, there's its aforementioned extension of the writing. On top of that, the Blair Witch was known to many at the time as a hoax. Continuing the charade at that point would be desperate and pathetic. But that's exactly what they did. Which brings me to the first alteration. Artisan forced Berlinger to include this title card stating Book of Shadows is a dramatic reenactment of true events. Well, like, we're supposed to believe Artisan is milking these fresh cadavers for cash? Or maybe if they wanted to kill their company. This also affected another project. Ben Rock was tasked with making Shadow of the Blair Witch, a documentary special. He pitched the idea of creepy anomalies behind the scenes of Book of Shadows. A neat concept, a meta-documentary on an already meta-movie. Artisan approved. Until later, when Artisan told Rock to scrap his idea despite him already having written a script and starting filming. Another addition to my Asshat Artisan compilation. The revamped Shadow of the Blair Witch details the true story of the sequel, maintaining the act the first movie was factual. Also to the dismay of Berlinger, who wanted Book of Shadows to be clear the first film was fake like it is in our world. Presenting the movie in continuity of the Blair Witch is like an admission of falsehood. This is a reenactment, fake, continuing the canon of a fake documentary. This completely undermines Berlinger's intent as well as my recent compliment. There is no membranous border between fiction and reality when Artisan's "yeah, this is real" concedes its own farce. But that's not all Artisan felt the need to ham-fistedly touch up. As stated before, they pushed for more bloodshed, resulting in what you see before you.
Man, I hear voices all the time.
It's so awkwardly wedged between scenes. Just flashing random imagery isn't scary, it's distracting. This approach is the antithesis to the first movie. Berlinger agreed. The whole tradition of the original Blair Witch Project is that all the horror happens off-screen. In fact, it's very Hitchcockian, he protested. Supposedly, Mullen responded, "The fans of Blair Witch don't even know who Hitchcock is." Just further testament to Artisan's obliviousness to what made the original so beloved. The Book of Shadows did not need more blood, it could afford greater fear. I hardly ever felt afraid, partially due to the hallucinations. I don't want to bash these moments too much, they deserve some praise. They can reflect the character's diminishing sanity or the encroachment of an evil entity. They necessitate the film's subjective perspective as well. These moments also support the movie's ambiguity. Are these happenings a product of mind or magic? Tristan sees an apparition of Eileen Treacle, a supposed victim of the witch. After confiding in Steven about it, he witnesses the same sight. Similarly, Kim notes a rash on herself, but once Kim sees Erica marked with runes, Kim finds the same on her own body. Though explainable by some dark force, the movie cleverly writes these conduits that can contribute to the character's group hysteria. Though I found the vision's detractors more than anything. So many occurrences are quickly revealed to be non-actual. The frequency that something is revealed to be illusory forms a series of redundant plot beats. To make matters worse, these visions become the norm. So my care would just clock out of scenes expecting them to be non-real. Meaning for much of the movie there's no palpable danger. The heavy reliance on visions derails the script. The Blair Witch Project engaged audiences so well because most scenes were rooted in human confrontation. Even little squabbles like which direction to take were interesting because it got the characters arguing. Though Book of Shadows can achieve that here and there, many moments revolve around character versus this unknown force. The overuse of these supernatural psychological happenings misguide scenes away from the human conflict, all around killing my interest. Artisan tried to alleviate this in their final alteration. The movie often cuts to later interrogations of the main characters. Originally, these scenes were reserved for the finale. Berlinger thought interspersing these scenes throughout the movie skewed the audience to preconceiving the cast's guilt. While that may be true, it at least made me ask, how did they get there? This hint of intrigue was at least a welcome reprieve from the film's usual monotony. We're getting to the ending soon enough, but first I want to highlight one of the VHS and DVD's special features. The Secret of Esrever. Following the credits, a featurette plays explaining creepy behind-the-scenes footage. Rewinding the featurette reveals words spelled in the corner. These words direct the viewer to ghostly images hidden in the movie. A cool addition, they didn't have to create this new content for the home release. Even cooler though is the greater mystery. The official website contained a search bar where one could input a secret code hidden in the movie. A movie scavenger hunt, huh? Well, let's get hunting. So the hint grave leads us to the word further. But after that we're on our own. Guess I have to analyze the footage from here. Can't be it. It doesn't make any sense. Unless... Seek me no further. Seek me no further, that's it! Alright. A video?
Doctor's gonna want to keep
Oh,
you
it's
here
this
till your
scene.
temperature stabilizes. Your body's telling you something was wrong. Something was wrong.
Something is wrong.
Well, that line wasn't in the final cut. That was kinda hokey. Oh, and that's the end of it? That's it? I scrolled through your movie back and forth frame by frame. I made this my Da Vinci Code, and all I get for it are 3 extra words in that scene where the ghost girl does the goofy waddle? While the reward is underwhelming, it is fun trying to analyze the footage like the characters in the movie. Not to mention, it's cool they experimented with this new engagement on the home release. No matter how you watch the movie though, the ending is consistent, so let's get to it. A similar Blair Witch tour the group had crossed earlier is found dead. Back at Jeff's base of operations, the shaken adults discover Erica's corpse. As suspicions rise, Tristan acts as though she is the Blair Witch. Sadly, the lackluster horror carries over to the climax. The slow pursuit of Tristan fails to excite. Provoked, Stephen hangs Tristan. However, our remaining leads are arrested for the murders. Presented with irrevocable video evidence, we are left to question what evil damned these characters to their fate. One of my favorite things about the original Blair Witch was the audience input its ending welcomed. So I'm glad Book of Shadows attempts a similar uncertainty. Were the events that transpired sorcery or psychology? But is it as even a seesaw as it seems? It's hard not to accuse Ellie Kedward when the movie inserts itself into the Blair Witch canon. Though considering that was studio mandated, it only goes to show how much Artisan screwed up their own movie. So let's filter that out and judge the film as Berlinger intended it. Besides a dark entity, hysteria is a valid culprit. Tristan begins the movie pregnant, although unwanting the baby. When she later miscarriages, the doctors comment,
"How does she get so cold? It's like she's been sitting in ice water."
Stephen, on the other hand, wanted the child. Mind you, he is the one to kill Tristan. Tristan had motive to sabotage her pregnancy, while Steven had motive to murder Tristan. However, neither believe they are responsible for these actions. Their delusions could just be protecting them from their own guilt. This is the depth I admire in psychological horror. But not everything is as sensible. Jeff kills Erica while mutually undressed. Why? There weren't any sexual undertones to their interactions. Only Steven felt sexual tension towards Erica. Jeff hung around Kim most of the time. Then there is the mass murder of their rival tour. This occurs on only the main character's first night together. I don't care how high, drunk, found footage philic you are, 5 people who've barely known each other 12 hours could not unanimously, subconsciously agree to kill several people at the drop of a hat. This big kill seems to be for drama's sake. But I think it would have been better omitted or relocated chronologically to when the characters are neck deep in their delusion. As is, this and Erica's murder hinder the "it was all in their head" theory for me, thus unbalancing the dichotomy. Nevertheless, the ambiguity is important for the questions Berlinger sought to raise. The movie weighs the relation between media violence and real violence.
Violent art has inspired real-life violence. In this case, it's the Blair Witch Project.
Which I consider a stretch. The Blair Witch is one of the most tame horror films I can think of. What brutality is there to inspire? Most of the movie is fumbling around in the woods. There are many movies that can be used to question the impact of fictitious violence, but Blair Witch is not one of them. The big idea, though, centers around the Blair Witch's marketing.
I wish that they'd thought ahead toward what type of repercussions could come from using the word documentary in their advertising and on their website.
The characters, especially those who view the movie as truth, are painted as deluded. A fair point. After seeing the actors alive and well on TV, you would have to live in fantasy to continue believing the footage's legitimacy, let alone travel to Maryland because of it. This brings me to a line from Steven.
The Bermuda Triangle. It's a place in the world that's been created by people's own ideas of the place.
A parallel to Burkittsville. There's nothing inherently exclusive to the town that screams occult. But a fictional documentary put Burkittsville on the map as a mecca for witch hunters. The town feared these new visitors, especially the theft and vandalism that followed. Book of Shadows merely upped the ante to murder. These obsessed fans removed themselves from reality and the town suffered real hardships from actual crimes. Though the hysteric group that goes on a killing spree is fiction, the story they tell is fact. Berlinger crafted this tale to illustrate the damaging repercussions from disinformation. This is more tangible today than back then. Think back to 2016 when conspiracy theorists and fake news were louder than ever and had real power moving voters. Time only vindicated Berlinger's warning. But at release, fans were having none of it. When asked where he went wrong, Berlinger said, "My mistake was to inject into a horror franchise some intelligence and social commentary." I beg Berlinger to reconsider the high horse he mounted. Look at films like Parasite or Jordan Peele's works. Hundreds of thousands of horror fans celebrate their social charge. Your sequel had the goodwill of the Blair Witch Project. A critically acclaimed box office blast loved by millions to this day, and people still don't like Book of Shadows. Makes me think there's something wrong with the film rather than the film goers. But I think I understand where Berlinger's coming from. Viewers and critics were merciless. One wrote, "Documentary director sells his soul." The reproval was so unapologetic it sent Berlinger into a depression for months. Not to mention Artisan's forceful reshaping of the project scared Berlinger off narrative films until nearly 20 years later. I think there are a few lessons to be gleaned from the aftermath of this sequel. For critics, movies aren't people, but the creators behind them are. So be mindful of whom you target your hate towards. And from an artist's perspective, don't let criticisms determine your sense of artistic worth. Now, before this becomes a PSA, let's reel it back and close the review. Book of Shadows Blair Witch 2 is a toughie to summarize my thoughts on, but I'll try my best. I had to filter out Artisan's changes to see any worth in the movie. The blur between reality and fiction supported a meta theme I commend of the film. Though the writing can manage an occasional wit, its imperfections make themselves known. The redundant plot progression on top of the lackluster character interactions, horror, and tension make for a boring sit. No matter how much I admire its ideas, they're just ideas. They don't make this hour-and-a-half-long slog worth watching. Even ignoring Artisan's interference, I still struggled to enjoy the movie. Repeatedly, Berlinger had offered to Lionsgate, current rights holders of the Blair Witch, to make a director's cut, to no avail. Although I consider Berlinger a victim of studio and critics, I don't think his cut would fare much better. There are innate flaws with the script and edit can't fix. Even so, Book of Shadows deserves to be the best it can be. It's not on Blu-ray over here yet, so maybe in the future the movie can have its day. This has been the making and breaking of the Blair Witch's ill-fated sequel, Book of Shadows. I've been Zibboyeye, or just Zib is fine, and thank you for watching. Zibbo, bye bye!